So you've run headfirst into the woke brigade in academia. Can you tell us a little bit about your adventures running through that gauntlet?
The gauntlet's been, more soft for me, and I mentioned that I was sort of soft canceled when I had my, interview and talked with Jordan Peterson a little bit. It's just that you're basically at a disadvantage all the way through. And so in my case, I was never, at least right now, openly canceled or fired for saying something, but I've had opportunities that I haven't been able to simply because I speak out. You're not going to get hired in an academic department if you tell the truth now. It's going to be a lot less likely, although the tide is turning a little bit. The woke DEI statement stuff is kind of, we're seeing a little bit of pushback and effectiveness there. But as far as me being canceled, it just resulted in not having appointments renewed and so forth and so on, and ending up in a position where I had to speak out on X and develop a Substack to do the work, to allow students like yourself to speak out about what they're saying, and more or less to attract a following, to have a platform, because the institutions have thoroughly, disgraced themselves. Now we're seeing some pushback to that, and fortunately I'm able to do some part-time statistics teaching, but you never know what someone could say if you say that there's no transgender individuals don't exist. That's a false cognition. That's, you're at a detriment when you're constantly having to wonder if you're going to be canceled one day to the next.
Yeah, that's interesting. It feels to me, from my perspective, like you can be a heterodox thinker or a white man, but not both. Like you have no grace period there. You are not allowed to be a heretic, essentially.
Well, certainly once you start adding up things like heterodox thinking and white male and any other thing, you're definitely at a very big disadvantage. Now, my hope is that we're seeing some change in the political, landscape right now, the political atmospheres, that we're being able to speak openly now. I think there is some pushback, some realization that it's gone off the rails, but you're still at a disadvantage. You still have equity and belonging and inclusivity that get emphasized at these universities, and it's all politically, leftist ideology. But I think my impression is that I think we're seeing students now, especially at the more southern schools, Big Ten, CC schools, we're seeing some pushback. I mean, students aren't stupid. They know they're being lied to, and I think a lot of them are tired of having to be told what to say or censored and so forth. And so I think the tide is turning, but we have to be vigilant. We have to keep pushing as academics and as professionals.
I think there's a unique way that it breaks your spirit when you're required to say something you know is not true. Even, like my first day of class, you say your pronouns, it's a way to kind of break you down mentally. And, you've built up quite a following. For me personally, being in academia feels very isolating. You feel very alone and kind of alienated. And then you get on social media, start connecting with other people who are having the same experience. Does that feel validating, I guess, to see that from other people? Hey, I had the same experience.
Well, it's validating, but it's more validating too, just to speak the truth. I mean, I know that even though I've trained in psych and I've trained in methodology, and that my ideal work was in academia and writing and research, that if I need to, I'll just go and get a blue collar job and grind it out. And I've done that a little bit. I've talked a little bit about that on Twitter. It's not exactly ideal, and it's not exactly something that I enjoyed as much as I do teaching and research, but I said, screw it, man. You just got to say what you think and feel, and that in and of itself, it helps with your mental health. And you just can't give a screw. You can't give a fuck, really, is really what it amounts to. Obviously there's a line that you have to draw when you're in an institution. You can't be totally off the rails, but you get to a point where you need to push the boundaries and push the envelope a little bit when you're being censored so ridiculously and unfairly. But it is, I've had many students contact me on Twitter DMs, some I knew from before, some at prior institutions that I've been at, who have said this is insane. And so that is gratifying. And it's very gratifying when someone says, really, I love your feed, keep it up, whether they're an academic or not. And one of my goals is to, via my feed, not just sort of connect with blue collar people who are never, who think poorly of academia, but to actually encourage them to take academia seriously, even though it has disgraced itself, because I want them to understand there are some legitimate academics out there who may use big words or talk in ways they're not used to, but who nonetheless get them and understand them and that are unified with them.
Yeah, it's, I think it's so admirable that you were, rather than toe the line and, pay fealty to the Politburo, you decided to, go your own way, and you took a job at a deli, I think. Is that right?
I took a part-time job working at a stadium as security for the Pirates games. And then I did some part-time deli work where I basically served customers when they came in to get their chipped ham or whatever, man. And that was, it didn't pay much. It was, wasn't the most fun experience, but it's working class. It keeps you real. You see regular people. You serve regular people. You got to deal with regular people. And by regular people, I mean just people that work jobs that are disconnected from the laptop class. That's what they do. They work 9 to 5. They grind it out. And that's a different lifestyle than the laptop class or what we're doing right now, podcasting. I mean, it's a completely different world. And so being a part of that keeps you grounded, and it keeps you from falling into this sort of laptop psychopathology yourself, where you just are solely disconnected from how most people really live and grind it out.
I completely respect your perspective. I think that's incredibly admirable, but part of it makes me really angry. Like, I have a professor who's, very well respected, goes around presenting at conferences. His research background is in studying animated Spider-Man. That's not an exaggeration, and you have this rich knowledge and this deep understanding of the literature, and you've got this research background, and you're being kind of shut out of academia. Just something about this, when you see certain people succeeding in academia and then people like you who are ostracized, it just violates a fundamental sense of fairness, does it not?
I mean, I try not to think about it that way. I mean, teaching stats keeps me grounded. I have some opportunities that have come my way through speaking out to continue to do my work. But I mean, the social sciences largely have disgraced themselves. The work that's being funded, and people, like you mentioned, doing research on, I mean, you saw a couple of months ago, like the olfactory, the politics of olfaction by that.
Olfactory oppression.
Yeah, it's absolute lunacy that work is being funded. I'm sure that person that wrote that dissertation I'm sure they've been educated, but imagine if they would do some real work rather than that ridiculous, stupid nonsense of political ideology that's leftist and postmodern and stupid. And it does, because Twitter has allowed me a platform to connect and to speak out, that doesn't bother me as much anymore. And I've also, because I did that work that I just mentioned at the stadium and at the deli, you have the knowledge and you develop in yourself a confidence that if it all goes to shit again and you lose and everything, you know that you can go back down and do it again. At the end of the day, you got to put food on the table. And so one of the things that's good about doing that kind of stuff, even just for a period of time, is to know that if this sort of pseudo world that intellectuals have to be in right now, which is basically online, I mean, hell, I even teach online, and a lot of courses are now being taught online, you are disconnected from, like I said, how most people live. And so being able to kind of navigate those two different worlds is important to me.
So you spoke about just what a disaster and a disgrace that the social sciences are. How do you fix that? I mean, it seems like this ideology is so entrenched. How do you overcome that?
Well, you overcome it by creating parallel institutions, creating podcasts like the one you're doing now, which eventually sort of, you connect with people, and eventually you get enough people connecting and networks building, and you can establish parallel institutions. But you have to do it. It takes time. I think some universities and colleges may be more salvageable than others, depending on how woke some have become. but it's really a progressive, and by progressive in this case, I mean step-by-step process of building networks and coalitions to rid social sciences of leftist ideology, get it more balanced and more grounded in biology. But again, it's a time-intensive process, and it requires you to be constantly plugged in to connect.